This is Whispering Adirondacks Radio. This time on Whispering Adirondacks Radio, we sit down with longtime resident and dedicated community volunteer Don Morrison, who has lived in New York for over 45 years with his wife Connie. Together, they talk about their years in town, where they grew up, and how they started volunteering in the community and on the J Village Green. This interview is a multi-part series, which we will upload a new broadcast every 2 weeks in the spring of 2023. In part 1, Don and Connie talk about growing up, careers, retirement, and how they got involved in the community as volunteers. Don also tells a few stories from his 40-plus years of J Village Green volunteer service. Stay tuned for Part 2 coming up in 2 weeks, here on Whispering Adirondacks Radio. Mm-hmm. All right, welcome to the program, Don, and today you're sitting next to your wife, Connie, and we're at your house here in New York. Tell us where you were born and raised and a bit about your life and career.
Okay, well, I was born in Carthage, New York, and raised there, and went to school, went to college at Plattsburgh State. Got my teaching credentials, taught for a long time, then became principal, and stayed with that for 20 years, something like that. We never really know, 20 years of it. And then...
where were you principal of?
What's that?
Where were you principal of?
In Lake Placid.
Oh, okay, Lake Placid.
Yeah, the elementary school. And then when I retired from that, and then I worked for 9 years for Plattsburgh State as a student teaching representative, and
okay.
That's where we are.
And you had military service as well, right?
I have military service I was a dog handler in Vietnam.
Okay. How did you get involved in the community? Was it before retirement or after retirement?
You've always been involved in the community.
Actually, before. I think it was actually before.
Before?
I sort of drifted into it,
okay.
Just a little bit at a time, and then it kind of grew.
And then it got bigger and bigger, so
bigger
to speak.
and bigger, yeah.
When did you retire?
I know exactly when it was 1990. It was in the 90s.
When did you get started with the J Village Green?
I don't know. I think back about it. I don't know how that happened. It wasn't. Bandstand was not in great repair at the time, and
nobody was mowing. No one was mowing.
Yeah, nobody was mowing. The fountain had just been built. I think he had just done that a few years before I retired, probably. He built the fountain, but there was no fountain to it. It was just a fountain. There was no water.
There was no components in it. It was just
pump,
the base.
No pump doing that.
Okay.
Overgrown and unsightly.
Okay.
Yeah, it just kind of got left, I think, after it was done.
And you had mentioned that you had permanently moved here 36 years ago when I was here last week? Something like that, around 30, 35 years ago?
Actually, it was longer ago than that. It was 40-some. Stephanie's 47, and she was born here, so
okay.
It was probably 46 years, 47 years.
So do you remember, I found a news article at the Wells Memorial Library, and it talks about 1976, that the bandstand was in bad repair and they were thinking about tearing it down then.
Right.
Do you remember at that time?
Yeah, I remember that, and I did go to the town about that and did ask if they would, could do something about that. And then it was, that's when the pavement was put under it, and I don't recall Oh, yes, then I after that had happened, after they put it on the foundation, I got a hold of, actually, it would be Jay, which of the wards, Jay or?
Sid?
Jay Ward
Yeah, it was Jay, that probably I got a hold of. And we talked about.
and Sid.
Yeah, and Sid, and just it was Dottie Madden, and geez, I don't know who all else is on it. But just a group it was a group of about six or seven of us kind of got together, and we said we're going to do something about this. And then we did go to. We sort of went to the board about it. I don't remember ever having their blessing on it, but mostly we just got together and said we're going to do something about this. So we did it. We took it on ourselves, and we put a roof on it. We put the new roof on it. We put the new siding. We put all the new siding. The way it looks today is because of what we had done back then.
Right. I remember when I was constructing the visitor informational sign, the new one that's on the green now, and Jay Ward had stopped while we were putting the cedar shakes on the roof of the sign, and he said that this was 2 years ago now, but he said 30 years ago he remembered shingling the roof of the bandstand with a couple other people.
Yep.
And I don't remember the people's names that he mentioned, but obviously I think you must have been one of those people.
Oh yes, yeah. It was just a bunch of us who decided to get together. We didn't go to anyone about anything, to be honest with you. We just said we're going to change the way this looks, and that's what we did.
Community spirit was running deep that time.
That was about it. Yeah.
The wards have always been supportive of the park and supporting Don and whatever he wanted to do.
We wouldn't be where we are today without their help.
They planted trees.
A real quick story: when there were two huge trees in there, and then other smaller trees around it, and they were pretty unsightly.
The cedar trees, I think you were mentioning.
And we decided. We just got together as a little group and said, we're going to tear those trees out. And then one Saturday, Sid came down with equipment and actually lifted them up, tore them out of there. And there were people over on the Methodist church here. There were people yelling at us, what are you doing? Why are you taking those beautiful trees down, And Sid, as only Sid could do, yelled back at him, we're putting in a McDonald's. And that was the end of that.
It was Earth Day. It was Earth Day.
Yeah, on Earth Day. We did it
Tore the trees out on Earth Day.
Tore the trees out on Earth Day.
And that's what had upset the people much, because they're celebrating Earth Day and they're over there tearing the park apart.
Yeah.
And we're tearing out the trees.
The cedars are known to be very messy trees.
They were messy, and they served no purpose. They were horribly overgrown, and
they probably started out as a shrub and they got out of hand from.
Probably, I'm sure they were started out small and got huge, and
that fountain has been there, was there as long as I was born here, in 75 years ago, but it had been totally ignored for years and years and years. And so there was no water. There was only some cobblestones, and half of them were laying on the ground. There was and the cedar trees had grown right up around over the top of, so it wasn't even visible. Mm-hmm. So it was an eyesore. And nobody was mowing the grass in the park, and nobody was trimming the trees, and nobody was decorating it then. Yeah. It was just a forgotten eyesore. And Don said, we've got to do something about this, and started the ball rolling. And he painted the bandstand, and he mowed all the lawns, and he trimmed the trees, and he planted more trees. And what you see is Don's hard work from all that time.
We wanted those trees to go around the perimeter of it, and we went to was that Maxwell, who ran the nursery down here, and we went to him and begged those trees, and we got another group of volunteers, and it was Mary Clara Smythe, and there were, I'm trying to think of all the others who helped do that, and we got on there one day and went out there and planted all the trees around where you see now, and they were just tiny. I mean, you could hold them in your hand. They were just little trees. Mm-hmm. But he donated those to us, and we planted all of those, and we stood back and watched them die. Every one of them died.
Oh, jeez.
And we went back to him again, and he gave us another whole load of trees. We replanted them all the way around the way they are now, and they were just, they were, I don't know, an inch thick or something like that. They were nothing.
Yeah.
Very, very small. And they took off. The second time they took off, and that's what's down there today. Yeah, we lifted those up and put them in there.
Yeah, I found a couple different informational pieces on. I found in the newspaper article that I found it at the Wells Memorial Library, and I can't find documentation of what the newspaper name was, but I have a name of the person that wrote the article. But they talked about the trees from long ago, and they talk about a lot of different things, which I'm going to get into in some of my questions that I have for you. I have a bunch of history wrote down that I'm going to read over, and you can hear it and make comment on it. But it's really nice that, hearing the stories that you're telling, because it's important for the locals, old and new, and people that are just moving here, new people in town, to understand the importance of the park, to understand the importance of the bandstand and the fountain and the history behind all that, and I think you even established the flagpole in the park. So
we did. That's another great story. You want to hear that?
If you want to, yeah.
Okay.
As long as we're not going to get anybody in trouble. We're not going to get anybody in trouble.
Well, I got to be a little careful, but in 1980 during the Olympics, I was driving by Whiteface, and I noticed 4 beautiful flagpoles laying out there. And the Olympics had already been, but apparently they had these 4 left over. And I went to someone in the Olympics committee, and I asked if they would be willing to donate a flagpole for us for the park. They said, we can't do that. That's not, that was for the Olympics, and even though they're left, and a couple of them were slightly damaged, they said, but we can't give it to you. We can't have you put it in the park. I said, well, okay, I guess there's nothing we can do about it. So weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks went on, and one day I was sitting at home and the phone rang. I got a call, and this voice on the other end said, you don't know who this is. You're never going to know who it is. And I want you to know that at 5 o'clock today, a truck will be dropping off a long silver device with a rope on it that you can use in the park. And I can't say who it is but I do know. I know who arranged all of that. They must have begged somebody somewhere along the line. And 5 o'clock, I came down, and this truck came rolling down the hill and over there, and that's a huge pole, heavy and everything, and dropped it off, and away they went. We never heard from them again. So I got
an Olympic connection to the park.
To another group up from Wards, from some people from Wards, and Bill Ward, or Bill Lincoln, excuse me, Bill Lincoln, and his dump truck, and he brought that down and backed that up, and everybody got under that pole, lifted it up, put it in the truck. He tipped the bed back and slid it right into a pipe that I had put in the ground. I put a pipe in the ground and slid it over the top of that pipe. It was so easy. It was done in an hour. We were done with it. And wired it and put a light on it.
And it's been there ever since.
It's been there ever since.
And it's doing its job. It's representing representing town and country with the flag that flies on it. Stay tuned for part 2 coming up in 2 weeks here on Whispering Adirondacks Radio. In part 2, Don and Connie talk about memories over the years at the J Village Green, local residents who helped them, and we start digging deep into the history of the Village Green and its components like the historic 1800s bandstand, the fountain, lighting, trees, and hopes for the future of the park.